This one has to come with some disclosure before we get started, because there are some topics that a person has to, or at least should be, qualified to talk about before making a long-form video essay on the internet. It isn't that you have to have certain experience per se, but if you don't, then you're gonna want to consult somebody who does. As you see by the video's title, we are going to be talking about disability and the representation of it on this show, and the reason why I feel comfortable leading this discussion and why I felt fascinated enough to do this one in the first place is because I am myself physically disabled. I have spina bifida. I don't want to focus on that too much here, but I wanted to make it known before we jump into today's video. I don't go into my personal life on this channel because that isn't the kind of channel I want to be, but for the purposes of this video, I had to put it out there. If you have any questions you want to ask, drop them in the comments and we'll talk there. Or even better, seek out other disabled creators. There are many out there. This is one of those topics that I feel needs to be discussed and that I don't see the community touch on all that much. And that, ladies and gents, is where I get my material. I find sticks on the ground, tie it together with a random shoelace that I found lying around, and make decent content out of it. I'm like a bird making a nice little nest with Bonanza-themed things all over it. Seriously, though, if you saw my room, any normal person would think the wheelchair is the least of my issues. So with that out of the way, let's talk about disability representation in a 60s Western. As someone with an invested interest in disability representation in media, I take note of it when it is tackled on Bonanza. I will no doubt go into a long-form tangent whenever it is featured in a specific episode when I get to those reviews. Today, I want to focus on the best representations that we get from our main characters rather than just the guest characters, so I will save thoughts for characters like Tom Edwards or Charles LeDuc for when I get to the videos on those episodes. Adam and Joe each get an episode where they are put in a position of physical disability that has the potential to be permanent, and I want to talk about how each is handled. We're going to go in order here, so for that reason we'll start with Adam's paralysis in Season 5. In the episode Triangle, Adam is building a house for his fiancée, Laura Dayton, and he intends to surprise her with the completed home on their wedding day. For this reason, he doesn't tell her about it. After she and Cartwright cousin Will realize that they are in love, they find Adam and plan to let him down easy, and he is startled by their arrival, falling flat on his back. The remainder of the episode focuses mainly on them and their inability to tell Adam the truth because of his injury, rather than focusing on the recovery and injury itself. We really only see a couple of scenes with him in the wheelchair, and his feelings about the accident aren't really touched on all that much beyond how it pertains to her, and his realizations about his desire to marry or lack thereof. This is already a two-parter, and the accident doesn't happen until part 2, so they don't have enough time to cover it all, while also resolving Will and Laura's love in one single-hour episode. This is a real shame, because I would have loved to see Purnell flex those acting muscles with this. It is reasonable to assume that he would have gone through many different emotions, not even having anything to do with Laura, but rather with himself and his situation. Unfortunately, he doesn't even get to be upset or hurt at all by her leaving him. Now, okay, we don't need him to be defined by that. It certainly doesn't have to be all about her. But it kind of was anyway, so at least this way we get more of him. As it stands, we don't even get Hoss and Joe's reaction to the possibility that their big brother may never walk again. In fact, we get more of Will being concerned about it than them, and that still is mostly all about Laura. Hoss and Joe build that ramp for him, and that adds a couple of cute lines, but we need more. In a previous episode, The Horsebreaker, a hired hand is injured and winds up with the same physical limitations. Ben gets to give him a huge pep talk. He never gives Adam one of those in this one. The only conversation father and son have is at the end, when he tells his pa that Will and Laura are in love. Then Adam finds the strength to pull himself out of the wheelchair in a surprise ending. I would have loved to know more about what was going through his mind before that. In terms of his attitude, I do love that he keeps his composure and stays happy and positive. There are many disabled people with fantastic attitudes, so this does represent that pretty well. Adam also isn't one to let his emotions fly too much. However, if he had shown some anger or sadness, I would have loved it. If Ben had been put in a position where he had to tell him to stop feeling sorry for himself, I would have eaten that up too. I have read that Purnell wanted to make the scene where he stands up a lot more dramatic, and the first take had him looking like it took a lot of effort, and they decided that they didn't want it to be that intense, so they scrapped it. I can take that or leave it, honestly. I would have been fine with both, but still I want to see more in between. Whether it's fear that his able-bodied fiancé will wind up leaving him because he doesn't know she had already planned to, or have him worry that he can't give her the life he wanted to now that he is disabled. It would also have been interesting to have him feel that the accident is their fault for startling him like that, even if he doesn't really feel that way. He can lash out in a moment of frustration. You can still have an overall good attitude about being disabled, while a moment comes here and there where you are just tired of it. Trust me, I have some personal experience with that. Purnell does a great job with what he has to work with, but he doesn't have enough. Later, when he stars in Trapper John MD, he has a situation where Trapper has to deal with a physical paralysis, and I won't spoil that for you if you've never seen it, but he gets to actually play out the illness and doesn't have another storyline to focus on there. The episode is called Fall to Grace, and it's absolutely wonderful. They actually show his recovery in stages and how each other member of the cast feels about it. So, the triangle suffers from being what amounts to will resolutions, with a disabled Adam in it somewhere, not the other way around. Therein lies the problem with it, at least for the purposes of exploring disability. Next, let's talk about Joe Cartwright's bout with blindness in The Stillness Within. An explosion causes Joe serious injury to his head and he goes blind. The doctor doesn't know if he will ever recover his sight. He's in denial at first and refuses any help, even wanting to send away a teacher sent from the Blind Institute to help him. He keeps telling everyone and himself that he will see again, but not out of a positive attitude, rather a denial and fear of the future of potentially being blind forever. As he starts to give up hope, he gets angry. He feels like a burden to his family and even to a girl that he likes. She stops by and gives him the gift of a jar of jam. In the first place, he's embarrassed by her seeing him like that. When she hands him the present, he has to ask her what it is because he obviously can't see it. I feel the second-hand humiliation for him, and it's so realistic. One thing a person with a disability hates feeling, but that we feel in abundance, is shame and humiliation when we try to fit into spaces not made for us. Who that really says something about is another story, but the emotion and pain are still there. The feel of the jar reminds him of the jar that caused the explosion. This is a perfect detail which causes what looks to be PTSD in him, and he sends the girl away. Him feeling like a burden is so indicative of what so many of us feel at some point in our lives with a disability. His anger and even his little moments of joy when he is able to learn something that Miss Dobbs is teaching him are so relatable. The way Ben, Hoss, and Jamie all feel helpless and don't know what to say to him at different points is very well done. Michael Landon's portrayal has me bawling my eyes out all episode. I thankfully have never had the experience of being blind, so I don't know if his portrayal would feel as accurate to someone who knows the situation, but I myself think that he does a fantastic job, and I think this episode focusing on only the situation of his blindness, and not just using it as a plot device to move another story along, gives it much more room to breathe. We get to see him learn new tasks, and we watch him in everyday moments. We even see him contemplating going to teach at the Institute, so he has a place in the world, making a difference. He shows that there is something he can contribute, as can anyone with a disability. When taking these two episodes and comparing them, Joe's goes further to show us all that Adam's could have been. However, both do very much with what they have. Not all disabled folks are angry and bitter, but neither are all of us happy and sweet all the time. We are all human with complex emotions about everything, especially our own physical situations. We go through moments of fear and pain, hopefulness and gratitude. One thing that they both display throughout each of their respective episodes is courage And that was a great inspiration to me growing up watching these for the first time, and it still continues to uplift me to this day every time I revisit them, and I often do. I would have loved to see what Adam's episode would have been like with Mike at the helm directing and writing for it. With his focus on family and the relationships that make it up, I think that he would have focused more on Adam's journey of recovery and the support of the family than on his love triangle. See what I did there? With Laura. Representation is important, and in my opinion, it is a huge deal that we see both of these things portrayed by our favorite characters and not just a guest character that we'll only get to know for one episode and never see again. It hits different because we know Adam and Joe. We love them. We want the best for them. We also admire them, so to see someone we admire also struggling with something that we may see ourselves struggling with is so important. To see that they too got angry makes us feel a little less weak for having moments of anger or self-pity. To see them overcome helps us to believe that we can too. They are fictional characters, but to many people, it is their favorite fictional worlds which make everyday life more bearable, and they can teach us things and make us see our lives in new ways. Storytelling is supposed to open our eyes to new ways of thinking, whether we have gone through what they are going through personally or not. Even though Adam and Joe's disabilities were only temporary and ours might not be, how they handled those moments can still be an inspiration to us. And even if you're watching as someone who is fully able-bodied, and you just know and love someone with a disability, seeing how the Cartwright family handles it might help you know what to say. Maybe seeing Joe get angry but come out of it stronger can help you understand that sometimes we do feel sorry for ourselves, but that doesn't make us weak. Maybe seeing Adam work hard to get as far in his recovery as he can will inspire you to do the same. The point is, we identify with these men in these situations, and it goes a long way in telling our stories, at least in a retrospective way. Media is catharsis. It is something we can live vicariously through. We can relate to and with. At the end of the day, what could be more valuable than seeing yourself on screen in the form of someone you love and admire?